In terms of, most of what I currently do, I do work with a soccer group with young individuals, as young as 6, 7, 8-year-olds, all the way up until 17-year-olds. So which has been a great experience as far as putting this presentation together. But most of my time is working with college athletes. And the interesting thing that wherever this took place, where this change took place in terms of this sports specialization, I think has been detrimental in terms of, I know with many athletes that I work with. Most of the athletes that I see at the age of 19, 20 years old, at that time they're trying to teach them how to do a proper squat because they haven't been taught at a young age becomes very challenging. And it's difficult to teach those bad habits, we'll say those bad habits that they have ingrained at that time. So hopefully, as I go through this talk and as we see this afternoon, as we put the training into practice, you'll get a good idea of just keeping things very simple and adding variety with a purpose is all that needs to be done. Anyways, so first slide here, I think this is important. Young athletes are not miniature adults and shouldn't train like adults. One of my stints, I did work at Bowdoin for 8 years, and then I had a 5-year kind of break where I worked at a sports medicine clinic. And during that time, I worked with individuals, a lot of adults, but then also youngsters that had there was a lot of, as we know, obesity is on the rise. So a lot of kids that might come into the clinic, one of the things that physicians and most individuals were used to doing is saying, if we're going to help children lose weight, let's put them on a treadmill. Well, wait a minute. That may work for adults, and I think even for adults, that gets boring. Would you agree that if you had, what would you enjoy doing more of? Playing a particular sport, but not even that much, just doing some sort of games, things that are fun, that are short sprints with a little bit of recovery, and then maybe adding in some push-ups, some plyometrics, things like that are a little bit more exciting. I think that would get more attention for the kids. So in terms of here, I'm saying should not train like adults. Unfortunately, it's taken some time for us to change our ways. I'll go back to even with athletes. Here I am I do work with youngsters, and most of my time has been with adults. I've done things many times wrong. In terms of when I work with the kids, my thinking is, wow, here I am with 6, 7, 8-year-olds. I want to do the same things that I want to do with my college-age kids. And then I realized, you know what? They're just having fun. Even if they, if I'm trying to teach them how to skip, their skipping patterns are awful. Why try to change it? They're having fun and they're trying to learn. Instead of always trying to be very specific in their mechanics of, are they using their arms? Are they not using their arms? So, at any rate, my point being is, we should just let them go at their own pace and have fun. So our objective, hopefully today, is that we'll talk about age-specific off-ice training guidelines. Okay, number one. Try to outline in terms of using what's already been talked about yesterday with the long-term athlete development program. What are those age brackets that we want to start with our different focuses? And even the same, even though as I mentioned some things that work best for 6 to 8-year-olds, those things should be revisited all throughout the continuum. 8 to 10, 10 to 12. I even revisit, like I said before, because many of our kids do not have those basic parameters, those basic standards, I'll revisit back to those. So it's ongoing. Develop year-round off-ice training that focuses on simple to complex exercises, variety of purpose. So simple to complex exercise activities might be, first off, as we go through some different exercises, the simple tennis ball drops, which kids love, all right? So have them start on 2 feet. Or then maybe having them go on 1 foot because it's a little bit more challenging. They have to work on a little bit of balance. So again, simple, and they make it a little bit more complex. And then the most important thing is variety with purpose. There's a lot of different, we'll talk about different training stimuli out there using stability balls, medicine balls. Not necessarily a fan of saying you have to use weights, but there's a lot of things out there. The most important thing is, why are you putting that into your program? It's done with a purpose. What is the focus behind it? The organization of drills, how you can set up in terms of stations, relays, and games. And again, what you're going to continue to hear this repeatedly is making sure that it's fun. You want to have those kids continue to come back and love dry land training. I think one of the things that I'm always constantly told, with the college kids that I work with, man, triathlon's hard. Or just in general, as I work with the other teams, like, this stuff, you know, this isn't always exciting. So even with the older kids, I have to find ways to make it exciting so that they continue to come back. Obviously, it depends upon space and what you have for equipment. So we'll talk about that too as well. Fun, cooperative, competitive. And then for the last maybe a couple minutes, we'll talk a little bit about nutrition guidelines. So as Vicki had mentioned yesterday very well in terms of that long-term athlete development, I'm not going to go into that much detail. She's already paved the way, which is fantastic because I probably would not do very good justice by it. But as we know, it was broken down in terms of early specialization and late specialization. I'm not even going to talk about early specialization. We know that early specialization doesn't work. We've done that, we've been there, we're trying to make that change, moving away from it. And I'm going to move away from hockey in the sense of, in terms of soccer. I know that soccer is trying to pave that way too, as well as saying, shoot, we spend so much time telling our kids to have a ball on their foot all the time and to forget about the basic, just fundamental movements. So late specialization is much more effective. So there's two areas that we're going to talk about. There's 6 areas there. 2 areas that we're going to talk about. It's the fundamental and the learning. We'll talk about suppleness. We talked about it yesterday, flexibility, how important it is to teach those kids at that young age. The interesting thing is, all of a sudden, and this is why I cringe sometimes whenever I'm working with, we won't say the 6 to 8-year-olds, because 6 to 8-year-olds, I have their undivided attention. They are a phenomenal group to work with. When it starts getting to be 10 to 12, they're like, oh, not her again. Oh no. And when I start to have them do any sort of like squats or lunges, the first thing they say to me is, my doctor told me I couldn't do those. So I'm going to ask you all, when you sat down in the chair, what did you do? You did a squat. What's a form of squat? So, anyways, interestingly enough, this is something that we should be teaching. So when I say overall sports skill, teaching the fundamental skills in terms of just what sometimes I say is ADLs, activities of daily living, what we all need to do, even the kids. So quality skill development opportunities, we want to make sure that there's a focus and purpose behind it, that they get a lot of repetitions, and again, let them be kids. Don't try to correct every single, and I always say every single little movement pattern, which I have done wrong. Connection and choice. Make sure it's an engaged, it's fun, and there's some sort of involvement with it. And I've got some videos that I'll be showing a little bit, and that kind of relays that a little bit in terms of how much fun. When you see the smiles on these kids' faces because they're doing tag games, just simple little things that I remember as a kid we would do on the playground. We would just come up with those things creatively on our own, and that creativity has been lost. It's been said that when females, and girls will mention, when there's no intrinsic motivation, if they have no desire, they move away from sport, they withdraw from it, because it's no fun anymore. So it needs to be something that, one, that they can find that connection with, that bond with, and that it's enjoyable. One little thing on that in terms of girls, it's funny, and I was mentioning to Coach the other day at work, and I see this even with girls, again, with the group, the older group that I work with. We have, unfortunately, or fortunately, I do work with 33 athletic teams. And because if anyone's familiar with Colby College, falls under the NESCAC guidelines, and William does too. And what that means is Division III. You cannot make things mandatory in training. It needs to be volunteer. Which is nice in some ways, but it also can make it very challenging too as well. So there's a huge learning aspect to that education aspect. Anyways, when we do this combined group training, we could have anywhere from 20 kids to 95 kids or 100 kids for time. We don't know. But what I always notice is that when they come in, and this is a small school, everybody knows each other. We'll have men's soccer comes in before we start. And they're standing here. Women's soccer's over here. Football's over here. We've got field hockey here. And they're all clumped together. They have that bond. And one of our things is obviously we want to try to, as they get older, move away from the bond. But it's that connection that I would say that girls have, that they need to feel like it's comfortable. You know, I can do this training that's a little bit challenging with guys, but I have my other group. It takes a special, I think it takes a special girl, a special female athlete to be able to come in to, and we have some of those that'll come into training sessions 40 guys, one girl would be okay with that. Normally that doesn't. So step number 1, fundamentals. The age category for this is 6 to 8. The goal is developing movement skills, locomotive patterns, throwing, kicking, the basic things that we all have, or we all had in physical education classes back in the day. When I looked at this, and I'm like, this totally makes sense, although, again, in my training, sometimes working with kids, I forgot about that. You know, I went through all this training when I took phys ed, oh my goodness, back too many years ago. And it was all about movement development patterns for young kids. Let's just have them learn how to, you know, maybe this simple pattern, just not the proper, they're just here stepping and they're throwing. It almost looks like a shot put. But kids get that ball in their hand, get that ball in their foot to be able to learn those different patterns on their own. So what are those fundamental movement skills? Running, swimming, jumping, throwing, kicking. Did want to put in there as much as possible in terms of that whole air, water, ice, snow, land components. That's what, as many things as possible as we can. It's so funny how when I talk with, we'll go with swimmers for example, from hockey and soccer. And they can be great in their particular sport in water, but they never really honed in on the fact of how to move their body out of water. And it's one of those things that I think, you know, if we can teach them at that young age, it's lifelong skills that should always be with encouraged. So multiple sport participation is encouraged. There is no focus during this age. It should be soccer, field hockey, maybe that's a little, should not be that way, basketball, volleyball, all those different particular activities. So anyway, I was working, I'm sorry, I'm going to give a lot of different stories, so hopefully you don't mind. I was working with, before I came here, Thursday, I was working with two soccer athletes, college soccer athletes. And this 6-year-old girl was sitting up in the stands of the gym where we were at. And it was our male hockey coach's daughter. And she was just sitting there like this. You could tell she was a little bored. And as she saw us pulling up the ladders and stuff, all of a sudden she's kind of like getting a little intrigued. So I asked if she wanted to come down, and she was like so excited. She jumped off the stairs, came down, and wanted to join in as much as possible. So we would go through ladders, and then we took our girls through a little dynamic warm-up stretch. Well, she's like, oh, I want to be totally part of this. The interesting thing was, as she was going through, she was performing lunges much better than my college kids were. What's going on here? You know, I'm doing a very awful job, which I probably am. Or these kids weren't taught that at that younger age. They were specialists. So a couple of the girls were like, well, what sports do you guys, what sports do you participate in? I said to the 6-year-old. I was like, oh, I do football, I do soccer, I do basketball, I swim, gymnastics, and they're like, whoa. It was completely foreign to them. So, interestingly enough, it's great that she has a dad, parents that are just highly encouraging her to participate in a lot of different activities. As I mentioned, cooperative teamwork, working with others, body spatial awareness. One of the things that I've noticed working with 6 to 8-year-olds is that when you set up drills and you have them sprint, you could have cones. They're on a line and they're sprinting to that cone. They don't understand lines. They don't understand. Their space is completely gone. So they'll take you literally. So I'll say, okay, sprint straight ahead. Well, then they think, well, I must have to sprint to you. So they sprint to me and everybody's coming in all these different directions. And you're like, oh, no, we're going to have a crash course. So at that time, it's just a great opportunity rather than correcting them, allow them to figure that out. And it is amazing how it happens. And again, I'll show some different games that we'll do, sharks and minnows, where they're weaving it around people. Yes, they collide into each other. The nice thing about kids is they're so resilient. When they collide, they drop down, they get back up, which is fun. So, fun games to develop speed, power, endurance,